I have absolutely been overwhelmed by the amount of people that have asked for my strategy, my delete method strategy in overcoming anxiety. So I am going to, in this video, break it down for you. First of all, this is not for hypnotherapists or other therapists that want to try and mimic the process. There are lots of things you need to understand to be able to carry out this process first. If you want training on this, that's going to be coming this year. If you type training below, I will put you on the waiting list. This is really for anybody that wants to overcome the overthinking, the stuff that goes on in your mind that gets in the way of you doing what you want to do. Maybe it's causing anxiety, procrastination, lots of different things. This is to delete anxiety and overthinking. So people are confusing thoughts with emotions. If you try to bury an emotion, it can affect you for years and years on end. However, if you repress or get rid of a thought, this is very different. So there's thought and emotion. And thoughts create a release of hormone into our nervous system. So every thought we have will trigger some kind of hormone release. If we think of something funny, happy, if we hear a comedian, if we hear something that makes us laugh, it releases a hormone that makes us smile or makes us laugh. We don't consciously decide to smile or laugh. It's a hormone release, maybe endorphins that make us smile and laugh. Equally, if we think about an anxious event, so if you think about a trigger thing for you, maybe that's driving, maybe that is a meeting at work, maybe that's going to a social event or a medical appointment, start thinking about that event. As soon as you have those thoughts, you're going to get the response. You're going to get the anxiety response because you are releasing adrenaline or cortisol into your nervous system. So, as I say, lots of people have a different view on how to get rid of the thought. Cognitive behavioral therapists will try and help you. I've trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. Will try and help you reframe it, see it from a different perspective, which is great. Only we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts per day. So for you to monitor and regulate all of those thoughts at a conscious level is nigh on impossible. And that's why CBT tends to work during the process and then starts to get, you start going back to normal afterwards. There has been research from that's come out of Cambridge University recently that has backed exactly what I have been saying for 2 decades, that you can literally delete the negative thoughts that release the hormone. So to understand this also, you have to understand that our brain puts thoughts on automation. Most people think that their behaviors are habitual. It is our thoughts that are habitual and they create our behaviors. So, for instance, if you every single day start to have a biscuit at 3 o'clock, after about a week, your subconscious mind will have learned that 3 o'clock is a time for biscuit and it will give you the thought of having a biscuit. It's habitual, your thoughts. If you wake up at the same time every day, then you switch your alarm clock off, your body clock will wake you up at the same time. Our thoughts are habitual, they cause our behaviors. So, understanding that, then we know that if we don't have the thought, we don't have the hormone release. So, if you have two people getting in a lift, one scared of getting in the lift, they will instantly have thoughts as soon as they see the lift that will trigger thoughts of, oh my God, what if I get stuck? What if I pass out? What if I don't feel well? That will trigger those thoughts. The person getting in the lift that is not scared of lifts, as soon as they see the lift, they don't think anything. They don't think anything about their lift. They are just thinking about what they're having for dinner, what they're doing later. The thoughts aren't there, so they don't release the adrenaline. So, how do we get rid of the thoughts? I'm sure you've been given the advice, just don't think that way, which is great advice, but how on earth do you do that? As I say, back in the day, people used to go to counseling. Counseling is absolutely useless for anxiety because what we're doing is we are just constantly talking about the anxiety. When you talk about it, your subconscious mind deems it as really important. It will remind you about anxiety all the time. So, speaking about anxiety non-stop is not a good idea. Moving into the neuroscience of this, if I start to talk to you about my dog, Princess, is a German Spitz. She has a black fluffy coat. She likes to attack children or postmen. She hates small people. I start talking about my dog, you will instantly fire neurons. A part of your brain will light up if you're in a PET scan, a PET scan. Parts of your brain would fire in a certain area where your memory is, and you will start firing neurons and you will recall memories of anything related to what I am saying. So, whatever I said talking about my dog sparked something for you. And this is how conversation works. You would then tell me something about a dog you have or had, and then I would talk about something, and we start making this big neural network of connections around dogs, animals, and the like. That's what happens when you constantly talk about anxiety. You're building more and more synaptic connections. You're building this network of thinking. So, a good way to explain this is I once worked with a man that had a gambling addiction. And he wanted to stop gambling. The first question I asked him was, when you get your money, what are you going to do with it? He had nothing. So he had, if you imagine a room and there's, at the minute he just had one door. One door was gambling and this network of connections, synaptic connections about gambling. He didn't have another route to go through. So his brain would instantly just go that route. So I said, right, we're going to close that door. Where else do you go? He didn't have a clue. It took me an hour and a half of discussing what possibles he could spend his money on until eventually I realized he had an interest in motorbikes. All of a sudden, we started to open this door and we started to discuss what he liked about it. He liked repairing them. Could he start his own business? Gradually, we opened this other door and he started to fire neurons in a different direction. So what happened was we discussed motorbikes. We did no hypnosis. We did nothing. The next week he said, I don't need my other session. I got my money. And he immediately went to the bike shop to buy parts. He had another door to go through. He had built new connections, even though they were weaker than these connections, because these have been used so many times, these synaptic connections. He had a different direction to go through, and he was able to go that direction. So understanding that as soon as we have that trigger, whether that's the money coming in for the gambler, whether that's finding out you're going in a lift, instantly you will go and follow your normal route, your normal way of being. The delete method, so to speak, slams that door and opens another door for you, gives you another direction to go. And again, using neuroscience, as soon as we stop firing these neurons, calcium deposits build up on the synaptic connections and start to eat away at them. Hence the fact, the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if we don't fire these synaptic connections, eventually they break down and we forget about them. We forget to do this, this way of thinking. When people have when people suffer with Alzheimer's, they have too much calcium deposits building up on their synaptic connections, and that's why they lose connections all over. They have to really start using their brain and start to use it so that they can keep these connections going. So if we don't use that thought, eventually we lose that thought. So what I do is, first of all, I take people through this strategy. Session number 1, we look at in psychology what we call the negative ego state. So basically, you have a pattern of behavior. So if you walk into the kitchen and one of your family members that you know and love is in there and they are in a frantic state, as soon as you walk in that room, you know they are in a frantic state. And the reason why you know they're in a frantic state are lots of different things. First of all, it will be the frantic movements, the physical position. So we hold our state in our physiology. You will see their frantic expression. You may see their breathing is frantic. You may hear the tone, pitch, speed of their voice telling you that they're really frantic about something. That is a state, an ego state. So that is a frantic ego state. If you suffer with anxiety, you have an anxious ego state. And to enable you to go into that state, there is a pattern of behaviors. The pattern of behaviors starts with the trigger, finding out you're going in the lift, finding out you're going to the dentist, finding out you're going on a flight, finding out whatever it may be. So the trigger is always not the actual event, it's finding out about the event. And then the deciding starts, oh my God, what if this happens? What if this happens? You decide in advance, I am going to feel ill. I am going to panic. I am going to handle it in this certain way. We already start a pattern from well before the event starts, programming our mind that certain things are going to happen. And our subconscious mind at a non-conscious level just follows the pattern. So my first job in the first part of the first session is to bring awareness to this negative ego state, how you are creating those behaviors with your breathing, with your posture, with your thinking. It's a non-conscious behavior at the moment. So I'm just making it conscious, bringing your awareness to it. The second stage of the session, we literally ban you from talking again about the anxiety, which is very difficult for most people. But I am not a counselor. I am not dragging you through the anxiety and reminding you every day about it or every week, whatever it may be. We want you to move on from that anxiety feeling calmer. So the second stage is to start looking at the positive ego state. So everybody that's anxious is an overthinker. They overthink situations. And secondly, they have creative imaginations. And what I mean by that is they are innate, they are able to imagine a scenario and feel as though it were real. So they are able to imagine them panicking in a lift or whatever it may be. And they can't see anything else. They can only see the negative. But this is also a superpower. If you can overthink and think negatively about something and feel as though it were real, you can do that in the positive. So very often with people that are anxious, they do have A+ days. There are certain scenarios where they absolutely kick ass. They are A+, they can do well. That's when they are using this superpower of overthinking. Very often they're good problem solvers or things like that. They use this overthinking in a positive way. This ego state is the version of you I want to connect with, or the ego state that's calm. Sometimes you must be calm. When you're at home with your family or something, there'll be a different physical position. There'll be a different breathing. There'll be a different thinking pattern. You just don't get the negative thoughts in those moments. So I want to then connect you and remind you of this ego state. I then use hypnosis during the hypnotic process. I delete the negative thoughts that cause the anxiety and I reconnect you with this calmer, stronger, more in control version of yourself and enhance it. So instantly after the first session, you start to feel calm and more in control. Then there's exposure therapy. So then we would go through a process that exposes you to some of those scenarios that you previously had been triggered by. So it's a process whereby you might do something very minor. If you were scared of driving, you might just sit in the car the first day. Just sit in the car, fasten your seatbelt, start the engine, feel until you feel comfortable. You might do that 3 days in a row until you drive to the end of the street. We take small, manageable steps. Because you've had the hypnosis, you'll then realize that you're not triggering those emotions. You don't feel terrible and you start to feel more comfortable. It's like, oh, wow, I did that and I felt okay. So then you're ready for the next step. So that's the exposure part. If I left you there, you would probably do well for a while and then results would start to decline. So a week later, we need to automate this process. We do another session. We make sure that the negative thoughts are suppressed, are deleted. Well, they're not suppressed because we're getting rid of them. We're batting them away before they even start to come in. Because our subconscious mind puts things on automation, it's now learning that you don't want these thoughts because as soon as they start in your mind, you are saying delete and they are disappearing. So it's realizing you don't want these thoughts. So the second session is to automate the process, making sure that the new way of thinking, the new way of being, the new calmer physiology, the new calmer way of moving, breathing, the better way of thinking is your default. The third session I do is what I call an emotional clearance session. And this is not regression to cause for any therapists watching this. Definitely not regression to cause. I basically clear the emotion connected. So very often an emotion gets connected to an anxiety from something in childhood. It can. Maybe it's just something somebody says. It doesn't need to be a trauma. I just ask your subconscious mind, what is the cause? And it will tell me. So it's not regression, but it may show you something in your past. It may be something very minor. And then the fourth session is maintenance. It's teaching you how to not go back to that old way of thinking. And it's anchoring you in this new way of thinking moving forward. So we're collapsing anchors and we're rebuilding better anchors. So the whole process includes NLP, neuroscience, coaching, hypnosis, the delete method, the emotional clearance. There are a lot of different methods, but doing this process yourself is literally, you can do it by starting to be more aware, firstly, of the thoughts you are having. So when you feel anxious, what did I just think? What just came into my head that made me? And you will start to realize that you have a thought that creates the anxiety. Everybody, when they first start this process, goes, no, it wasn't a thought. I just feel like that. But the thoughts generally at a non-conscious level, because remember, we have 60,000 thoughts per day. But when you really assess it, you realize, I just thought about going to work on Monday, or I just thought about this. That caused the anxiety. So we can then start to delete. Now, another way you could do this is not quite as effective, but it will work. Elastic band. As soon as you have the thought, you snap the elastic band. That will give your subconscious mind and your body a clear message that you do not want those thoughts. It's a bit like a slap across the face. So as soon as you get a negative thought, snap. Women, you can wear a bobble, whatever it may be, snap. Your subconscious mind will quickly realize it doesn't want those thoughts. You do, however, have to give your mind something else to think about. You can't stop thinking. Most people think that meditation is to stop thinking. It's not at all. So we need to give your subconscious mind another way of thinking, which is the deciding in advance. If you want, where is it? My strategy written down so that you can fill it in, type yes below. I will send it over to you and you can fill it in. Or if you want the relaxation, the 15-minute hypnosis taster relaxation session, type hypnosis below and I will send that over to you as well.